Some general feedback about assessment 1. I just finished marking and you can see my eyes are all blurry, and there were some common things about the assessments that I thought it might be helpful for the next assessment. So the first thing I wanted to say was that actually nearly everyone got the idea of interviewing someone and what a human service organisation was, so everyone interviewed someone from an appropriate organisation, and you all got the idea around getting the mission statement, the values, and the goals. What some people then went on to do was to itemise all the different services around of what the agency did, and really I found this, because it was such a tight word limit, often used up a lot of words, that you would have been better off to talk about how these goals and missions and value statements steered the direction of the service, rather than just listing what the service. Then that would show how you see that length. I thought most of you got the idea around academic structure, so most of you had an introduction, most of you followed the headings, and most of you gave a conclusion. I think in teaching and learning they talk about how the conclusion is like similar to the introduction, and yes it is, but you probably need to include a bit more specific information in your conclusion about where you got to in your understanding, rather than saying I just talked about this and I talked about that. You can say I came to this understanding once I went through all this. Yeah. There was in the analysis part, a lot of you got the idea of what worked within the organisation, and I think that comes from the interviewees really wanting to highlight how they work well within their organisation, and most of you were able to identify what worked well. So even though they might have been working in some really challenging environments, you were still able to identify how the social worker worked well and what was the benefit to the clients. Not so much the challenges, and some of you did, some of you didn't. So when we're talking about analysis, we're looking at what the benefits are and what the challenges are, and because we're trying to show the complex nature of practice. So even though the interviewee mightn't have talked about the challenges, from the literature you could provide examples of what could be challenges. And then even further on than that, you could talk about strategies to address the challenges. And sometimes the interviewee was alluding to that. They were talking about, I do this, and you could have tried to make the link, they did this kind of strategy to address this kind of influence from the organisation. A lot of you talked about the influence of funding, and of course that's a huge influence on organisations, and I'm sure nearly every interviewee talked about the challenges of funding. I really would encourage you for analysis to break down what funding means. So what values does it represent, what emphasis of funding of government priorities or community priorities, what understanding of social issues does it represent. Imagine that there's a big bucket of money, and when we say funding tightens up, it tightens up for a reason, because it's being reallocated somewhere else. So it means that the emphasis or the priority is somewhere else compared to where it may have been before. And so your analysis can include, why do I think that? So why don't we have as much funding in mental health as we may do in areas of people with cancer? I don't know, that's just an example. Okay. So break funding down. What does funding mean? Analysis for the ones that did the faith-based organisations, Didn't get much analysis from you about the influence of Christian values, especially on the organisations, and I'm not sure whether that's just because the assumption is that we all come from Christian backgrounds and so it's so embedded in us that we just go, oh yeah, that's what it is. But break that down. That's that use of reflection to be able to identify the dominant discourse around our work. Some of you talked about partnerships. Why would we think partnerships are good? What are the challenges of partnerships? Because there are. The other thing I found interesting is majority of you are not using your full weekly readings to inform your analysis, and even fewer are doing wider research. And at tertiary level, the expectation is at the very minimum you would use your weekly readings and your text, and then I'm really thinking that you would do even more research than that, so that you would go and have a look. If you were doing a faith-based organisation, what does literature say about faith-based organisations? At times I found that, and this could have come from the interviewees, their emphasis, that the focus became on the client-worker relationship rather than the organisation-worker relationship or the organisation-client relationship. The other thing I finally would say was the last two headings was around consumer participation and working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and I got a lot of formal organisational policies around that, but not much analysis about whether that was effective, whether it was respectful, and whether it was empowering. So these are my thoughts. I thought on the whole you did a pretty good job. It was a tough assessment to put yourself out there and go and meet someone and talk about their organisation, and I hope that you have shown your gratitude towards the interviewees, because it's quite what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it's quite difficult to put yourself out there and share your practice in a really public manner, and allow scrutiny around that. So hopefully you've shown your gratitude to that. All the information around the second assessment, I'm hoping to contact Sue this week and discuss that, and hopefully have something up next Monday. But I've enjoyed reading the assessments, and I look forward to the next one. Please contact me if you want any feedback. I'm always really open to talking about the feedback that I've given, and to give you ideas, specific ideas about how you can improve your writing, and also tap into the Teaching and Learning website. Okay, thank you.